So welcome everyone after a few little hiccups. I'd like to thank our esteemed panel for being here today and to everyone joining in on the conversation about shaping company culture with content. If anybody listening and viewing has a question for the panel, we'll answer those towards the end, but go ahead and send them on over. I'm Mark Gaby with LookinLA. We're a leading digital marketing agency in Burbank, California. Chris Dyer is one of our current clients, and we asked him to participate in the webinar. Thankfully, he was willing and able, and he was also nice enough to ask Eric and Courtney to join with all of their wealth of knowledge on the subject matter. So thank you all. I'd like to introduce everyone and then just start with a quick question about culture and content. So first, let's welcome Eric Severson. He is the EVP, Chief People and Belonging Officer for the Neiman Marcus Group. He has 20 plus years of experience managing talent and driving organizational performance with Neiman Marcus, DaVita, The Gap, and Macy's. Eric, welcome. Thank you for being here. How is content for Neiman Marcus connected to your vision of culture for 2021?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Mark and Chris. It's really great to be here. Would you like me to go ahead and answer that question now before you introduce Courtney? Yeah?
Yeah, no, I'll introduce her right after you.
Okay, great. So it's a really important part of our transformation. If you don't know, we entered Chapter 11 in May of 2020 after the onset of COVID, and emerged in September a much healthier and transformed company. And we've moved from a cost management agenda to a growth agenda. So that requires us to attract quickly a significant amount of talent. So content in particular, and as it relates to our employee value proposition, is a big part of our overall people strategy, which essentially has three pillars. One's around talent acquisition or retention and performance. The second around associate experience, and then the third around people ops, how we operationalize the first two. And so a very significant part of our people strategy, which supports our growth strategy, is about differentiating ourselves from our competitors based on content.
Awesome. Thank you again. Let's bring in Courtney Seiter. She's the Vice President of People at Hologram Inc. and previously was the Director of People at Buffer. And she says she's slightly obsessed with creating a healthier work culture. So Courtney, welcome. Thank you for being here as well.
Sure.
How do you see this for, you bet. How do you see this for Hologram?
Yeah, and it's neat to have, two different perspectives here. Eric, obviously you're coming from like a really big company, transformational organization situation. Hologram is definitely on the smaller side. We are 70 folks right now and growing quickly, and we are in the Internet of Things space, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult to conceptualize for people. So a lot of our content is based on what exactly is IoT? What does it power? How does it work? It's one of those like ephemeral, confusing things. So really bringing it home as far as helping people understand like, hey, this is technology that powers artificial hearts, that helps farmers water their crops, that keeps, people from poaching sea turtles. Like we're in all these different industries and we have these incredible use cases. So to connect our customer use cases back to what we do kind of brings it all home, brings that mission and vision together. So our team and our potential teammates can really get energized and excited about what we do.
That's great. Lastly, I'd like to introduce Chris Dyer. He's the CEO of People G2 and the author of two books, one on remote work and one on company culture. Chris, thank you as well for being here. How are these two connected for you and People G2?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and excited to see Eric and Courtney again. So, for us, it's really been a little bit of a confusing time. So we saw a real reduction in, of course, background checks because people were hiring less. And then we started helping out in the COVID space. And so we did a whole bunch around COVID testing and trying to help people manage that really kind of unknown and scary time. And then people got really good at COVID testing and they didn't need us anymore. So then we sort of had to drop that very quickly. And all while we were doing this, we were being asked over and over and over again to help organizations with remote work. Being a fully remote company since 2009, we were like a lifeline to a lot of our clients and different people to help them. And that's not really like our business model. And yet we were being seen as like this, you know, remote company that they could turn to, that was accessible to talk about how do you manage people during this time. All while we're trying to get the word out about, you know, what we do from a core competency standpoint. So it's been really interesting to kind of mix some of those things and talk about all the different, I guess if you almost like an onion, right? Peeling us back, all these different layers that we have. And then how do we put that out intentionally that's not confusing to everybody? Because we don't sell remote work, but yet we're happy to help and talk about what we know. So it's been a great year, but in the last 6 months, that good work that we did in 2020 has really been turning now back into new business for us as people come back to us and said, well, thanks for helping us. Now we do want to talk to you about what we're doing.
Excellent. So we all know content's important, but working your culture into the content is even more important for the customers and employees. Eric, how are you communicating values and vision of Neiman Marcus between talent and clients?
So I think for us, several ways. So one, during our transformation post bankruptcy and as we're emerging from COVID, we've really been looking at all of our platforms and invigorating and connecting them. So for example, in our case, we have a workforce that is comprised of pretty digitally savvy associates who have access to mobile and digital technology and platforms, social collaboration, et cetera. We're a Microsoft operation, so we use Microsoft 360 and all of its products. There's about 40% of the population that doesn't. This is typical of retail, where our associates don't even have an email account with the company. So communication is incredibly historically old school. So it's through direct communication cascades from one's manager, postings on the work site. So that was true for much of our supply chain population, as well as support associates in some of our stores and alteration centers, et cetera. So you really have kind of two worlds. And again, this is something faced by lots of retail companies. And in addition to that, Wi-Fi, believe it or not, is challenging in some places. Is also true of retail. It's just difficult to get a really sound network across all of your many facilities. So what we've been doing is investing in alternative ways to be able to communicate with our workforce. So for example, we're implementing a new version of our timekeeping technology with Kronos. And what we're able to do is leverage that technology actually as a communications portal. So since it has mobile capability, and our associates will need to go in several times a day and clock in and out. We actually have the ability through APIs, et cetera, to create a communication portal there and feed our communication from Microsoft, SharePoint, Teams, et cetera, through that platform, so that by the fall, our associates who say work in a fulfillment center and previously haven't had any way to get direct communication from us will be able on their phone to not only clock in and out, but actually use Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, look at our intranet page, et cetera. So I think it's just an example of, I think we have to be resourceful. And there's so many possibilities now with the explosion of digital technology to figure out how one application or platform intended for one purpose can be used for another in order to extend culture to parts of your population who have kind of been at the mercy of receiving it through a leader only, as opposed to directly.
Great. Chris, what about you and People G2?
Yeah, I mean, so we try to use a lot of intentional messaging, not only to attract new clients, but we want to make sure that what we're talking about out in that space really helps people who want to join our organization understand who we are and what we care about, so that we can avoid bringing in people who don't get it. I mean, I had a nice interview with someone recently, and this person sent me an email, and every sentence started with the letter I. 9 or 10 sentences, I this, I this, I this, I that. And it was like, well, you're not for us. Like, I can already tell that if you don't think about teams, you don't think about the group, you don't think about, the company, like in this sort of different way of thinking. Like, people that generally work out, they say we and they say us, and they, there's just a language thing, right? You cannot just pick it up right away. And so we want to really make sure our content and what we're talking about is about the community, about the client base, about, what we're trying to do for the community. I mean, our purpose is to make the world a slightly safer place. And we do that like one background check at a time, right? We make sure that sex offenders don't end up in schools, and people who steal money don't have access to your checking account or your stock portfolio or whatever, right? So like, we have to make sure that the people we hire are aligned with that as well. And so that's part of our intentional marketing every time we go out and do that.
Great. Courtney, how about you and Hologram? A similar situation with Chris, or closer to Eric's? Or your own?
Yeah, no right or wrong answers here. All just variations on great themes. Yeah, so at Hologram, we have 3 values that sort of guide everything we do: transparency, mindfulness, and ownership. And I really view content as a way to keep us accountable to those values and sort of transmit the spirit of those values, not only to people on the team, but also to investors, to customers, to potential customers and potential teammates. I think it really is a chance to walk the walk. If we say we value transparency, what are we sharing openly? Are we trying to put on a facade of perfection, or are we really saying like, hey, we tried this and it went kind of bad, and we just thought we would let you know so you don't do the same thing? That's the kind of level of transparency that I like from a company, because it really feels like they're human people, at the helm, making sense of the business world that's like ever changing. So if we believe in mindfulness, are we talking about healthy work-life balance? Are we talking about mental health? Are we acknowledging that we're coming out of a global pandemic and are sort of facing anxieties that maybe none of us have ever faced before? So it's a real act of authenticity, I think, to be real about your values and to share them in a concrete way. And it's a real opportunity to build connections with people.
Sure. Does your marketing content for clients connect in any way to branding for talent?
Is that one for me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. No problem. I would say not directly, but definitely indirectly. It does. As I said earlier, being in the business of connecting anything to the internet, and things being, a scooter or a grain silo or, a medical device, is not the easiest thing to explain. So we do spend a lot of time trying to share case studies on how Hologram's connectivity helps our customers improve the world, whether that's in medicine, biotech, agriculture, ecology. So anyone who is, seriously looking at Hologram as a place to work, I would very much hope that they are curious people, and that they're devouring any and all information they can about our company to learn about, how things work and where they can have an impact. So I'm newish there. I only started in January. So that was my first step, obviously. What is this company? What does it do? Can I understand it? Can I explain it to other people one day? So as a candidate, that was my first step, to really get in there and like read everything, understand everything, like, go to Google page 10 to see all the different things I can find about this company. And truly, I'm a little biased because I did that, but I think the best candidates are like that as well, just really voraciously searching for any information. So you can't leave any stone unturned. You want all of that to be considered as you plan your strategy.
Eric, what about for you?
That's a very much
connection between the two.
Yeah, for sure, Mark. So I think I maybe only answered part of your original question. I think what I was getting out of my original answer was that it doesn't matter how brilliant your content strategy is or how effective your creative is or copy or whatever, if nobody receives it. It's like the tree that fell in the woods. And that's so part of our focus is on access and enhancing that. The second part is just content strategy in general. So we, about 2 months ago, hired a new head of content strategy for internal comms, and recently a new head of brand PR for the Neiman Marcus brand. For us, we're a portfolio company, so we have multiple brands. And we have a corporate brand, which is Neiman Marcus Group or NMG. And then we have a Neiman Marcus brand, a Bergdorf brand, a Last Call brand, a Borchow brand. So it's sort of tricky connecting all of them. So you have to have a strategy where you intentionally articulate what is common to all of them across the group, the Neiman Marcus Group, and then what is their unique signature for each one of those. Individual. So part of our whole strategy and workflow is identifying the places where we get more synergy by connecting the dots. I think historically we have not connected the dots that well. So the way that we communicated it and engaged with candidates and applicants and associates could feel differently from our branding. And so we're going through a several months process right now of connecting all of those, even down to style guides that are common across both, even down to very tactical things like email signatures, PowerPoint templates, creative catalogs of imagery, so that when we're shooting photos of associates to be used in talent branding and employment brand marketing, there's a look and a feel that's not dissimilar from what we might do, say, in the Neiman Marcus brand or the Bergdorf brand. But what we're not doing is what we used to do is just use models, right? That's what we typically use in our employment branding. And you want to do some of that because some of the reason that people work for us is they want to affiliate with the luxury product and the brand imagery. But our associates don't all look like, size 0 models, and we want to communicate our culture is much more informal feeling than the brand representation, and we want our population to feel that. So there's a bit of work that has to go into connecting your consumer brand and your employment and talent brand.
So have you done any crossover to where you're using your actual employees for the photo shoots instead of bringing in models, or are you going across the board with just different?
We use both. So we have a pretty substantial photo studio in Dallas where we shoot the models, and we use that to shoot employees as well. Okay. We haven't done a lot with using associate models in our consumer marketing. We actually did that at Gap when I was there, and it can be really helpful and successful. And it's depending on what your campaign is and what the theme of the campaign is. We actually did it for quite a long time in our Gap and Banana Republic outlet division, where we exclusively, because it was cheaper, we used our associates as models in the in-store marketing and some of the other external marketing.
Do they get paid in apparel?
They get in Goodwill, and you get to see their picture when they go to a store and in the window.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyways, I think there's a lot of value to that, though. That drove a ton of engagement, frankly, among our workforce. We had to think about it a little bit to figure out how to do it, at Neiman's. But anyways, I think it's important to do. But so we're doing that work, and it's a lot of project planning and project management, and it takes a lot of rigor and discipline.
Great. Chris, how about for you and People G2?
Yeah, I think my answer is a good combination of Eric and Courtney's answers, which makes sense because they're smart people. Having a lot of content there so you can give people a lot to digest about you and your company is super important. But I'll tell you, we've done like 3 website versions in the last 4 years.
Wow.
And this most current version, we are seeing like gigantic changes in the amount of people asking to be contacted for new business. So clearly the website is resonating. Like we finally got the colors and the look and everything right. But what I've been noticing is that we're getting a lot more applications, a lot more people inquiring, and the people that we're making offers to are accepting at a much higher rate. So it's so interesting about how, I never would have thought this. They kept telling me the website's not quite right. We need to do it again. And I'm like, that costs a lot of money. What do you mean we got to do it again? You know, like, isn't this one fine? And they're like, well, it's fine, but we want it to be like spectacular. And so I would give in and we do it again. And then, but just based on how different this latest version is impacting both our business and our talent retention and talent acquisition, it really drives home the point that you really need to keep working at it. And to Eric's point, you got to have the colors right and the branding. I mean, it's got to be so intentional down to a level of almost like my brain just doesn't go that detailed, right? I'm not going to be that methodical, but I have people that do that for us and they do amazing work. But I'm never going to be like, well, it has to be this one yellow at the bottom, but it makes a difference. It really, really does. I've been proven wrong in a good way. That they did it again, and the website's really been performing for us.
That's great. Eric, maybe you can help us on this. What's the first thing a company should do to demonstrate their culture inside of content and messaging?
Probably be honest. And, one of the best ways, I think, to be honest is to showcase your actual people telling their own story. So okay. I think the companies who do this the most compellingly, Google's a good example. Historically, for a number of years, they've differentiated themselves in how they tell the story of the company and their career site and other places through investing a lot in associate storytelling and videos, et cetera. So, interestingly, I was experimenting with this a bit at DaVita and Gap, video job descriptions, for example. So in other words, thinking about the balance of copy and video and photography that millennials in particular, they don't want all your polished crap, really. They view your marketing. They're suspicious of marketing. They've been marketed to their whole lives and everything they do all the time. And so, they're detectives for...
They can smell it out, right?
They can smell a rat. And so I think it's not that you don't want your site to be clean and polished. It's just that I think that the old way of doing it is to have these very corporate messages about everything and also sound very corporate and perfect and buttoned up. And that's actually turns people off. Like, people don't want to work at that place. They want real people. So that's why the video job description idea is sort of interesting, is like literally have a hiring manager or someone in the job give a 2-minute description of what they do. And meanwhile, people are, if you're actually in the office, walking by and talking to them. It looks fun and interesting. So finding ways, using all of the gift of digital technology and everything that you can do with it to recreate what your culture's really like, instead of spending so much time like editing and trying to get the words right. Just show it.
Great. How about for Hologram, Courtney? How do you guys demonstrate your culture?
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you said, Eric. I really do think it comes down to authenticity. And I think the way to get there is to know what you value and know your culture. People really want to feel connected to your company's mission. They want to know the impact that you're having in the world. And increasingly, we really want that to be a positive impact. Millennials and Gen Zs in particular, they're looking for that company where they can feel less like a cog in the machine and more like the thing I'm doing makes a difference. And this company I can trust and I can be aligned with because I see that they're, donating to great organizations or they've got a wonderful diversity program. There's something substantial I can hang on to that says this company is trying to do some good things in the world. And I appreciate that. So when you look at companies like, Patagonia, obviously very well known for conservation and environmentalism. Tom's has the kind of like 1-for-1 model. Whole Foods, like very well known for like creating healthy, sustainable agriculture. So they're taking kind of like their work, their mission, and extrapolating it out into like a greater purpose for the world. And for me, that's really energizing and inspiring. I think that's something people can really get behind. So what I try to do, and this is handy because I have a journalism background, that's what I'm trained to do, is kind of go in and think like an anthropologist at your company level and say, what are we doing that's unique here? What's something that we're doing here that I haven't seen at another company? And it could be the tiniest thing. It could be like, there's a lot of emojis in Slack that are around like this topic. Like that's it. What does that mean? Or we always open our meetings with this sort of ritual. Like what's that about? Just kind of thinking like someone who's new to the culture and figuring out what it is that's special about it. And of course, I'm always going to have sort of what I'm calling cornerstone content around topics like our values, how we value and act on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And sort of how we work in an asynchronous remote first way. And then I'm going to flesh that out with like smaller quick hit pieces that are some experiments that we're trying or some like fun ways that we connect as a remote team. So always having that good balance of sort of larger picture cornerstone content and smaller hit content. And it really can be, it could be big, it could be small, it could be anything. Just keep thinking kind of like a newcomer as you look at your company culture.
Great. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I've had quite a few conversations with people that, would be the Gen Zs, the millennials recently, where it's sort of been a very similar conversation where they're basically telling me that what they were sold, the company they thought they were going into, is not the company that they ended up working for. And so there's a lot of frustration on their part. It's a good job and it pays good money, and like they're trying to figure out like, do I leave now? Do I cut bait now before I get too deep? Because this isn't really what I thought I was getting into, and they're disappointed, and they're so that kind of keeps me up at night, right? Like as we bring in people, I want to make sure, are we being authentic enough? And when I say authentic, I don't mean like what I want my company to be. I mean, what is my company right now? Let's be real. Let's be truthful. This is how big we are. This is really how we operate. This is what's good. This is what we're probably working on. People like this tend to do well. People like this, maybe you're going to struggle because we're not so good at this other thing. Like, how do we be that authentic and really tell people what to expect in a way that is true and not affirmational, right? Not like, this is what I'm hoping we're going to be like, or where do
you think the disconnect is coming in though, from what they thought it was going to be to what it actually turned out to be?
Well, there's a lot of times a recruiter or the HR person says this is what we are, and then they get on their team and their manager, like, you have autonomy to do your job and you can move up, and they get in, their manager's a micromanager and just won't let them do anything. And and I mean, I spoke to someone yesterday who's working for a big tech firm in Austin, and she's making a lot of money, and she's like, I don't know if I can let go. This is like way more money I should be making at this point in my career, but I am like, my soul is dead. Like, I hate this job. And so I don't know what to do. Like, go start a family and just let my soul be dead for 3 or 4 more years, or go find something that really makes me happy. And she was really struggling with this, concept. So, you got to make sure that it connects in a good way. I mean, this is the challenge I think every big organization has. We're get people in the door. We need great talent. The recruiters and the HR people go and do this, but they can't oversell it in a way that's not realistic, or you're just going to have a revolving door. People are just going to go.
Gotcha. Courtney, with your work at Hologram and Buffer, have you found anything that you could share about attracting the right talent with the right messaging, kind of similar to the issues that Chris is facing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to acknowledge, this idea of people aren't really as willing as they used to be to make ginormous amounts of money and be miserable anymore. And I think that's a good thing. Like COVID taught us some things. I think we're coming out of it with a different perspective. And, I think a lot of people are talking right now about the great sort of like migration. Like everyone's coming out of this period and wanting to change their lives, like wanting to like buy a house or sell a house or get a new job or make some sort of substantial change in their life to give it a little more meaning. That seems to be the theme that's running through all of this. And what that means for companies is we can't just keep doing what we've been doing in the past. Like the landscape has changed and we have to change along with it. And it does go back to authenticity, Chris, and figuring out like, okay, this is the experience we tell people they're going to have. This is the experience they do have. How can we marry those two together? Or how can we get everyone involved in figuring out the solution to like bridge that gap?
Yeah.
And then for me, that just means be experimental. My team is so sick of me saying like, this is a pilot, like everything is a pilot. Nothing is set in stone. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if we will continue it from day to day, but we're going to try some things. We're going to see how it goes. And I think that can go, that can sort of have to do with your content too, like where you are, who you're meeting. I am a huge like TikTok aficionado. I spend so much time on TikTok lately, and it's just creative and interesting. There's really cool stuff going on there. And I saw one the other night that was about was explaining how cell phone lines travel across the ocean floor so you could get coverage, wherever you are in the world. And now I'm thinking like, oh, that could really help us. Like, can we come up with creative ways to explain like connectivity, like 5G, like how Internet of Things works? So I think it's about constantly thinking about where people are spending time, where people are being creative and where you can find them and connect with them, which is where they want to be, not necessarily where you want them to be.
Great. Eric, with your 20 years experience, what are some ways you've found to attract the right talent with the right messaging?
Wait, not to be a broken record and a little bit to build on what Courtney was just saying. I think it's as much about the content strategy is as much about the distribution planning as it is about the content itself. So by that I mean the way that candidates and consumers decide where to buy or where to seek employment has changed so dramatically over the last, say, 15, 20 years. And they don't rely, candidates, for example, just on your career site, just like our customers don't rely just on our .com site. They're relying on all kinds of other methods to determine where's the right place to buy, what is the right thing to buy, et cetera. So for candidates, it's Glassdoor and Indeed, it's social media, including what our company is posting on social media, what our brands are posting, what our leaders are posting, like literally what I'm posting. Like they're mining the internet for evidence of whether or not this is the kind of place they want to work. And so it's not as simple as it used to be where you build a career site and you put all your great content on there and people go there and look. Most of our quality candidates for corporate, for example, aren't coming from our career site, they're coming from LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn account. And so as they're surfing LinkedIn, looking for information about Neiman Marcus Group, I'm assuming lots of them are looking at my page, looking at what I'm posting, look at what I'm saying. So even my own profile is loaded with digital content. Like most people's LinkedIn pages just have like text and you can put all this digital content. Mine's loaded with digital content. So if somebody looks at a posting and they click on my name and go and look at it, I want them to see as much cool stuff about Neiman Marcus Group and particularly about our associate value proposition and programs as they can. So I think like the way I think about your question is if you want to attract the best talent that's the right fit for you, create as much digital content and put it in as many places as you can that leaves the breadcrumbs of what it's really like to work there and is selling people on why they want to work for you.
And probably give a consistent message across all of those areas as well. They're probably looking for inconsistencies that might throw up a red flag.
That's right. That's the purpose of the content strategy, right? Like in the ones we're developing, we have the key themes that are aligned with both our values and our company growth strategy and our customer engagement strategy. And then those get developed then into distribution. Then we decide on any given week what's going on LinkedIn, what's going on Instagram, what's going on any other social media, as well as on our corporate site, as well as our media strategy. So it covers all of those things. What are our PR people pitching to media, which is not just our brand and fashion stuff, it's our people stories as well and our culture stories.
Great. Chris, I mean, you've basically built your team from the ground up. I know you've had some concerns lately, but was there anything that you did in the beginning to attract the right employees with the right message?
Well, in the beginning, I did probably a terrible job at that, and I just ended up hiring all the people I knew, right? Just like family and friends. It was like, well, I know you, I can trust you, get in here, right? But over the years, we had to evolve that strategy and then to certainly grow up from that. And I ran out of people that I knew to hire, right? So, I think for me, what's interesting about this question is that I was listening to Courtney and Eric talk. I realized sort of two things. One, my place where I'm good at is not in the attraction of talent or the attraction of new clients. My sales team's fantastic. My marketing team, LookinLA, they're fantastic. They do a great job of bringing these different groups of people to me. What I'm good at is once they're in the door, then putting in the strategy to keep them going and happy and communicating with them. That's where I tend to do a better job. So things like, I think about what's the content that an employee needs to have in the first 3 or 4 months. What do they need to be seeing, hearing from me, hearing from the organization? What do they need to be learning? Even if it's just a video of like how to do these cool things in Slack so they don't feel like they're left out from the rest of the team because they don't know how to do the emoji or they don't know how to do a screen share or what. And you would think they would just get it like through osmosis or something. But they need that training, they need that content so they don't feel like there's a click happening that they can't get into. The other thing is, I think as a leader, I have to continue to demonstrate an evolution, demonstrate a progression, right? And to show them like where I'm headed from a thought leadership standpoint or as an example. And I'll give you a one, and Eric will probably be surprised, but in Eric's email, he has his pronouns in there, and he has this little link that says, what is this? And I clicked on it and I read the article, and it started an entire discussion in our company about, should we do this? And is this important? Or should we just let this go? Like how do we feel about this? What is this all about? And I thought, because it was June, it was good to bring in, our LGBTQ plus employees and have this discussion and say, like, this is what I've been doing and this is why I've been doing it. And I've probably not been doing it right. And it was a really interesting conversation that I was totally wrong about. Totally had the wrong story in my head about why we use pronouns and what we should do. And they essentially, the short version of a long story is by you putting those pronouns in there, you are telling us this is a safe place to be. You are a safe person for me to talk to things about in a more deeper level. It doesn't mean you have to be one of those letters to have a pronoun, right? And I was like, I realized I hadn't had the right story in my head about all of that. And so that's the kind of stuff we got to keep talking about internally, right? To move the organization forward and to have the right people and sitting in the right seats. So again, it's less for me about like getting them from being not an employee or not a client. It's once they're in the door, then how do I continue to be a leader that way and move the conversation in the right way? So, and thank you, Eric, for doing that as well.
That's great. So we've kind of talked about talent, looking at obviously LinkedIn, Glassdoor, all of those areas before they make their decision. And I'll throw this out to the group. Do any of you think that future employees are also engaging on client-facing content along their journey? And if so, is that a good thing? And how does that fit in? And I'm throwing that out to anybody who wants to take it.
Mark, can you clarify for when you say client-facing content, like for a consumer product, what do you mean?
Right. So like any website that would be specifically for the Neiman Marcus group, do you think your current employees are going onto those sites and doing more of a client-facing content search, as well as going to like a LinkedIn site or going to Glassdoor or doing other due diligence, looking up your company before they decide to come aboard?
Well, this is interesting because I think Eric's challenge is very different, right? He has products. They're selling
True.
jackets and shoes and jeans, and like, how does that look to the employee? Where I'm selling background checks, which looks different, and you're doing the Internet of Things, which I still don't even understand what that means, Courtney. So you have that, right? So I don't know, Eric, what is it on the product side? What does that look like?
So with retailers, our career site always links from our .com consumer site. It's that way at all retailers. So we expect that most of our candidates who come as candidates through our corporate site are coming through the consumer site first, and they're usually consumers first. So in essence, it's back to that there's an earlier discussion that at all points of engagement, I think your content strategy wants to try to account for where are all the places, if it's candidates you're looking at, for example, are finding out information about you, and are you managing those actively? Like there are a lot of companies, they don't manage their Glassdoor page. There's a page, you can put lots of content on there if you want to, and some don't put anything or minimal. And actually you want to make that as cool and sexy as you possibly can. And you can't control everything, but I think, if you think with us, a very significant part of why people work for us is they want to have affiliation with the brands that we carry. There's something about those brands that they see themselves represented in, right, whatever it is. And our merchandise discount policy, like most retailers, is a not insignificant part of the associate value proposition. So it's very hard to divorce the two. They're very closely linked. And so I just think the takeaway message is it's good to do an audit of where your candidates are actually coming from. What % are coming from LinkedIn versus Glassdoor versus Indeed versus your career site, and then figure out, well, if there's a critical mass coming from a few places, what are they seeing when they go there? And is it what I want them to see? Does it really reflect my company? Is the cool stuff there? And if not, how quickly can I get it there?
Great. And kind of back to Chris's comment on the pronouns, are there any common mistakes aside from, small mistakes like that might deter somebody from coming aboard? Are there common mistakes with content that could cost key talent? I'll throw that to the group as well, just if anybody's got any input on that.
Courtney, it looks like you have something to say, maybe.
I mean, I can always think of something to say. I'll do my best. Yeah, I'd say I kind of feel like I'm beating a similar drum again and again, but I do think it's probably the biggest mistake you can make is not knowing why you're sharing the content, not having a strong purpose behind it, and not really tying it back to your company identity, mission, vision, values. Like it should all kind of have a cohesive common theme. And then I think the secondary piece is probably harkening back to the authenticity that keeps coming up. There can be we have a tendency to want to put a sheen on the content and say, like, look at this glossy, beautiful, perfect place to work. And people can absolutely, as Eric mentioned earlier, see right through that more now than ever. Our lives are fully Instagram filtered, glamorous at every moment. And we all know, the jig is up. So I think it's okay to not strive for perfection in this content. Not everything has to be perfectly polished. Not everything has to be shot by a professional photographer. Well, probably for Neiman Marcus it does, but not for us. It can be a little more like handcrafted. And sometimes that can bring a little bit of a different feeling and authenticity. It's kind of the difference between the Instagram is where everything's perfect and TikTok is where everything's just kind of like thrown out onto the app for you to see. And there's beauty in both of those things, but folks are really looking for that authentic experience.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like I'm always wanting it to either be like super curated and like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, right? I've seen some Instagrams like that, like even like their posts, like if you look at all their posts together, they somehow like look, I mean, it blows my mind. It's amazing, right?
Aspirational.
I either want that or I want messy and real and like, just, I don't want fluffy in between. Kind of just feel like, either you're so curated, like you've thought it out so well, like, well, that's cool that you can do that. That's a cool thing. The company can be that intentional. But if you can't, then just, I don't know, I guess I want messy and real and authentic and whatever that is, then it is, right? And you could decide if you want to be on that, you want to be a part of that party or you don't.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, don't fall in the valley in the middle or it will look unintentionally bad.
Right.
I would agree with everything that Courtney and Chris said, and we add something additional, which is, I think there's a lot of value in having your associates audit your content where it lives and different distribution channels and give you a point of view about where there's a disconnect. So, because sometimes to answer that question about where can you run into problems, maybe it's not about the content itself, but it's about whether or not there's calibration between what your intentional content is saying and what people find about you. So I think it's always good to start with a Google search about your company and its leaders and see what that produces. And because that's what candidates are seeing, they're going to Google you first and see what articles have been written about you, what your people are saying, and what does that say in their own minds and their hearts about what kind of culture you are versus what you have on your page. And if there's a disconnect, then how do you close the gap? If you say you're all about diversity, equity, inclusion, and your environment of belonging, and they go to some of your content sites and there's no diversity, and there's no suggestion that associates' voices are present, that would tell me as a candidate, there's a red flag.
Good point. Well, I think this is amazing stuff, and thank you all. If the audience is only going to remember one thing from today, I doubt that's going to happen, but what do you hope that they would take back to their company and implement? Chris?
Keep working it until you get something that is working really, really well, right? Just don't settle for it's good enough or this is okay. Keep working your strategy. Keep, get it to the point where you feel like, wow, this is working better than I ever thought it could, right? And I think you can see great examples at Neiman Marcus and Hologram or any of their past companies. I mean, that they have done that, right? And it worked really, really well. So I hope that people will go back and just remember that they need to keep striving for a very high standard, very high bar for their content if they want it to work.
All right, keep striving. Eric?
I think for me, it's have a strategy. I think a lot of organizations don't. They just build content. Like it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to hire a consulting firm. Just have a plan. What do you want to be about? And then audit yourself, audit all your points of distribution against it, and see what you see and lean into it. And don't think that you have to spend $1 million to make it good. Authentic is better, and sometimes authentic is stuff that's shot on an iPhone.
That's good. Courtney, how about for you?
Yeah, I think those are both great. I would say stay curious and think in smaller pieces than you might otherwise. Not everything has to be a giant project. Like sometimes an interesting culture story can be found in the smallest pieces of what people say and what people do and how they treat one another. So yeah, look out for those moments, and they can have a bigger impact than you think.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. Let's see if the audience has any questions for the panel. We're slowly wrapping up here. Looks like I've got one here. How can companies promote diversity in the workplace using content? I think we touched a little bit on that, but maybe a little bit more here as far as specific content.
That's a great one.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Okay, sorry, Eric. Yeah, I think what I like to do there is, well, first of all, know that, there are very few companies, if any, who are like getting it right, just like knocking it out of the park, like have the perfect, team that represents, their customer pool or their candidate pool. We're all, working on this together, and, we're overcoming centuries of structural issues. So, there's a lot to be done here. And that means the best thing I think we can do is share with one another what we are trying to do, what works, what doesn't work. I love to share, like, our demographics, our metrics, like my KPIs around where I want us to be and what those are based on. I'm always working with, other folks in the DEI space to see, it's like the rising tide lifts all boats here. Like, we're all trying to create a better ecosystem for people of color, for underrepresented groups, for women, for the LGBTQ plus community. So we all have to work together to make that happen. So a lot of it is based on educating others in the space, people who do the work we do, and figuring out how we can elevate all those underrepresented groups together.
Working for that common goal.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Eric,
did Eric have something to add or no?
Well, I can add something briefly, which is, I think it's helpful to ask your team what they value. We conducted sort of a quasi conjoint analysis a year ago as part of our people strategy effort, and asked our associates to force rank what elements of the value proposition are most important to them. And it ended up being total rewards, career development, flexibility, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think choosing what your brand is going to be matters. We use belonging. Our formula is diversity plus equity plus inclusion equals belonging, which is what people are really looking for. And we've built out a significant amount of content, and our content strategy for belonging includes every month very specific messaging that we use internally and externally based on the theme. So it's Pride Month this month, so we've got a whole series of things going on this month, and you'll find it on LinkedIn every day. You'll find it on Instagram and other places, and that's a place where we really sync up our brands, our external consumer brand strategy and our internal brands using the same messaging. Like, if you go to the Bergdorf Goodman windows in New York, they're Pride. You'll see the associates wearing Pride pins that are all part of our internal strategy. We have, we hosted an event last night with our CEO and Andrew Gelwigs, who's a writer out of New York, who wrote a book called The Queer Advantage. We're going to post that on social media. That was an internal thing that we invited media to, but then we're going to post it externally. So I think part of my messaging is that internal and external doesn't have to be different. I think there are certain places, like Safeway has done this pretty well over time, where for their diversity and heritage months, they have same marketing in-house and outside. And if you're shopping, you actually can hear their messaging over the loudspeaker. So the shopper hears it at the same time that the associates are hearing it, which is really awesome. We used to do the same thing at DaVita. We had our belonging messaging in the clinics, and it was for the patients and for the associates. We want the patients who go to the dialysis clinic 12 hours a week to feel like they belong there. And we want the nurses and technicians to feel like they belong there. So that's maybe my takeaway from that, is think about it synergistically. Everybody wants to feel like they belong in your place of commerce and your workplace.
Builds a connection.
Yes.
For sure, yeah.
And I would certainly say, to make sure that your content really does reflect where you want to be from a D&I standpoint. So if you're trying to get a more diverse set of employees in there, I mean, having the 20-something white guy or white girl on all of your ads is not going to cut it, right? You have to really think about that stuff. So if you want a diverse company, you have to have diverse people as a part of what you're putting out there if you want to attract, that kind of talent. So, and it's sometimes the easiest thing to do, but we just miss it. It's so easy to miss, but it's so easy to fix. So just be intentional there.
Good point. Well, we're kind of wrapping up. Anybody have any last comments or things they'd like to throw out?
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Chris and Eric and Courtney. Appreciate it.
Great conversation.
And thank everyone that's in attendance as well. The recording of this will probably be sent out next week. So everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.